G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Time for a bit of a rant. Here's the deal. Today, it's the 1st of April, 2019. It's 20 minutes past 1, local Eastern Daylight Saving Time. So it's actually around about 5 minutes past 12, give or take a few minutes. Local apparent time, as calculated by where the sun is apparently in the sky. Here and now. Okay, so we're past the point of the day wherein that one is permitted to joke and tell lies and spin bullshit because it's April Fool's Day, the 1st of April. Okay, so what foolishness might I dispel now that the sun has passed the meridian? Let's consider the people who are discontented, discombobulated by the fact that over in the excited status of Norte Armed Americano, a man called Robert Mueller has determined, after 2 years of diligent investigation, he's determined that there was no collusion between candidate Donald Trump and the Russian administration, i.e. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, ex-KGB colonel, despite the fact that when Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was a KGB colonel, Donald Trump's current wife was an 18-year-old member of the Slovenian Komsomolskaya, and she was a absolute fanatic true believer in the cause of Soviet socialism. And with a bunch of other sweet young things, she was dispatched into the West as soon as the wall fell down, with instructions to hook up with a rich man's idiot son and see how far up the ziggurat of power such an individual might be ridden via judicious use of pussy power. Robert Mueller wasn't asked to investigate that. It's just kind of like a background thing that's in there. That and the fact that when Donald Trump ran out of money after 6 bankruptcies and no financial organisation in the Western world was prepared to lend him money, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of prissy dunce Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin's Russian oligarchical mates decided to lend money to Trump. Donald Trump, the current POTUS full of flatus, President of the United States full of fart gas. But Robert Mueller says prissy dunce Donald Trump and his campaign did not collude with Russia. There was no collusion. There was no conspiracy. There was no treason. There was no sedition. What happened, apparently, was that Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin decided, elected to sow confusion amongst the American electorate and to do what he can to enhance candidate Donald Trump's chances of being elected. However, something less than 2.5% of the US eligible voters actually, no, 2.5% of the people who actually voted even saw the Russian meddling. Out of that 2.5%, 0.5% of the people who voted were influenced, maybe as low as 0.25%. So a quarter to a half a percent of the popular vote, which was not enough to have swayed the votes of the Electoral College, and that was what Tronald Dump was elected on. So Russia didn't succeed in electing Prissy Dunce Tronald Dump, but they tried. They didn't try as a result of any demonstrable, provable collusion. They tried it for the shits and the giggles. Russia tried to assist Prissy Dunce, or candidate Tronald Dump, in becoming inaugurated. That means to be screwed into place. Think about what an auger does, a grain auger. It screws things. Prissy Dunce Tronald Dump was inaugurated into place with the help of the best efforts of the Russian Confederation. Funny that, because apparently Comrade Colonel Prissy Dunce, Premier Prissy Dunce again, Vladimir Putin preferred to have a 6 times bankrupt in the Oval Office, somebody who only stood for president because he was hoping to lose and then be able to go on a speaking tour complaining about how he was robbed. And that is apparently the best guess as to why the hell Donald Trump wanted to do it, unless the theory about the Slovenian Komsomolskaya KGB connection operating via pussy power caused him to want to do it because, you know, like it'll please the Kremlin sort of thing and delight the Lubyanka. So anyway, there we have it. Prissy Dunce Tronald Dump is proven not to be a conscious tool of the Russians. The Russians were keen to see him put in there because they thought it would be funny. He would make a mess of the job of being the US President, Prissy Dunce. And in that they have been proved 100% absolutely correct. Prissy Dunce Tronald Dump has made a thoroughgoing mess of the job of running the excited status of Norte Armed Americano, unless you thought what he needed to do was make the place look like shit on a stick in the eyes of the world, because he's done a really good job of that. And now it turns out that the Russian Confederation has actually already got 100 Russian military specialists on the ground in Venezuela with 2 aeroplane loads full of people and equipment, and you know, you can fit a lot of people on 2 4-jet airliners, in order to safeguard and provide for the security of Russia's assets in Venezuela. And while America has been pissing around in Syria and Absurdistan and Iraq again, Russia and China have been lending money to Venezuela. So Russia and China actually own all the oil fields in Venezuela. Russia and China actually own all the oil wells, and they actually own all the refineries, and they actually own all the wharves for pumping oil. So it's a long way from China to Venezuela. I don't know whether China is going to provide for the security of its own assets in Venezuela, or whether they're going to contract to the Pentagon. Whoops, that won't work. They'll have to contract to the Kremlin to safeguard Chinese assets that they hold the title deeds to as security for the loans that they've provided to the Venezuelan government. And Prissy Dunce Tronald Dump says that Russia can pull its troops out and go away, but Tronald Dump doesn't have any troops in place. So that means he can't enforce jack diddly shit. That's a bit of an oopsie for the right-wing side of politics and everybody who likes cheap fuel in the excited status of Norte Armed Americano. Okay. We've got a few minutes left. We might as well have a look at what's happening here in Australia. Like the world doesn't revolve just around what's going on in Washington and among the pentagonal hemorrhoids. Over here, well, in New South Wales, the Liberal National Coalition was just returned for an historic 3rd term. However, there was a 20% swing against the Nationals. because the farmers have decided the Nationals no longer represent the people who live on the land. The Nationals represent whatever the Liberal Party says they represent, and that means the Nationals represent the mining companies and the multinational pastoral companies. And those are, together with global warming and droughts and floods and fires and torrential rains and downpours, those are destroying agriculture in Australia. So all of the disaffected farmers are blaming it all on the National Party having swung behind the miners, particularly the coal miners. And the only National Party members who are clinging tightly are the ones who have shares or jobs in the coal extraction and export industry. So at the coming federal election, which has to happen before May, what's likely to happen is there's going to be a nationwide collapse of the National Party vote. It's all going to shift to either the hunters, shooters, fishers and feral pig rooters party, because they have been the only credible alternative in the bush, so to speak, to One Nation. One Nation has hung in there and clung in there, and it keeps having horrible candidates who keep getting spat out for not being eligible for various reasons, dual citizenship or previous criminal record, or they get their candidates elected and then they have a Barney with hauling pants down and they bugger off. They've just been busted trying to get $20 million from the American National Rifle Association, not because Al Jazeera was setting up a sting operation to catch One Nation, but because Al Jazeera had set up a sting operation 3 years ago to catch the National Rifle Association, because Al Jazeera had noticed that the US National Rifle Association had spent a lot of money in Brazil and changed all the Brazilian gun laws so that America can sell more guns into Brazil. And they were trying to catch the NRA attempting to infiltrate Australian politics. What they got instead was an Australian political party attempting to get funding from the NRA. So all that had kind of been in the pipeline since back in October, November last year, even while Pauline Pantsdown was preparing to vote in favour of a law which made it illegal for Australian individuals or political parties to seek or receive funds from overseas governments or organisations. So it's going to be interesting to see where the disaffected farmers are going to put their vote. In the meantime, the Labor Party appears to have kind of sort of almost woken up to itself, and they're saying that Liberal National Party's offer to give the pensioners, poor pitiful me, $75 towards their next grid power bill just before the election as part of the budget, the Labor Party has said, look, that's just bullshit. What you've got to do is change Australia's electricity grid away from coal and gas-fired power stations and get it switched on to renewable energy. Because, by golly gosh, Gita and shucks, it turns out that the hippies and the greenies, they had the rights of this issue way back in 1912, when the United States Popular Mechanics magazine published the first article in any newspaper anywhere in the world pointing out that if humanity continued to burn coal and oil and emit carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, it would behave as a greenhouse gas and it would warm the global atmosphere. In 1912, the first newspaper article about global warming was printed in Popular Mechanics in the excited status of Norte Armed Americano. Think about that. For 107 years, people have been ignoring the news printed in the papers. Well, what can I say? Vote green or die. Ciao.